The muffled hum of the air conditioning system was the only sound in Atlas Tower at 2 a.m. Jack Sullivan moved methodically through the executive floor, his cleaning cart's wheels squeaking slightly against the polished marble. 5 years on the night shift had taught him to appreciate these quiet hours when the bustle of corporate America gave way to an almost sacred stillness. His practiced hands worked the mop across the floor in smooth, even strokes, his mind drifting to tomorrow's plans, with Emma a trip to the Natural History Museum to see the new dinosaur exhibit. The overhead lights in Raymond Carson's corner office caught his attention. The COO often worked late, but rarely this late. Jack pushed his cart toward the doorway, intending to skip the office until Carson left. As he approached, he noticed the office was empty, though papers were scattered across the mahogany desk. A half-empty tumbler of whiskey sat precariously close to the edge. Jack hesitated, then entered. He'd come back later, but he could at least empty the trash now. The wastebasket beside Carson's desk was overflowing with crumpled papers and coffee cups. As Jack lifted the bag, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor, a torn fragment that had missed the bin. He bent to retrieve it, his eye catching unfamiliar words. Meridian Offshore, Cayman, followed by a string of numbers that looked like an account code. Something about the way it had been torn deliberately from what appeared to be a larger document made Jack pause. Carson was meticulous, known for his attention to detail. This seemed out of character. Jack glanced around the empty office, then slipped the paper fragment into his pocket. Probably nothing, but something didn't feel right. He finished emptying the trash and moved on the paper, seeming to burn in his pocket. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of Jack's modest two-bedroom apartment in Queens. At 38, he had settled into the rhythms of single parenthood, with a practiced efficiency that belied the initial chaos following Rachel's death. 5 years had transformed raw grief into a manageable ache present, but no longer debilitating. Emma sat at their small kitchen table, her dark curls so like her mother's, falling across her face as she concentrated on her cereal. At 7, she was precocious in observant qualities that both delighted and occasionally unnerved Jack. Her eyes, bright blue against her olive complexion, missed very little. "Jack, do we have to get Mrs. Reynolds to watch me again on Saturday?" Her voice was casual, but Jack recognized the careful calculation behind the question. Jack placed a glass of orange juice beside her bowl. "Mrs. Reynolds is the only one available, sweetie. Why? What's wrong with Mrs. Reynolds?" Emma's nose wrinkled slightly. "She smells like mothballs, and she always wants to watch those old shows with people singing and dancing." "It's boring," Jack smiled despite himself. Mrs. Reynolds had been a godsend after Rachel's accident, a retired widow living across the hall who'd stepped in to help with childcare when Jack had been forced to take night shifts. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it was reliable and affordable. "I know she's not the most exciting babysitter, but she's kind and she loves you." Jack ruffled Emma's hair. "Besides, Daddy has to work." Emma pushed her spoon around the remaining milk in her expression thoughtful. "You could get a girlfriend. Then maybe she could watch me sometimes." Jack nearly choked on his coffee. The suggestion wasn't entirely new. Emma had been dropping hints about finding a new mommy with increasing frequency lately. What had once been childish fantasy was becoming a more pointed campaign. "Sweetie, it's not that simple. Finding someone special takes time, and Mrs. Reynolds says she knows a very nice lady from her church who would be perfect for you." Emma's eyes were wide with innocent manipulation. "She says she's pretty and kind and loves children." Jack set down his coffee mug. "Has Mrs. Reynolds been putting ideas in your head?" Emma shook her head, the picture of earnest sincerity. "No, Daddy. I put ideas in Mrs. Reynolds' head." Her smile was triumphant. "I told her you're lonely." Jack felt a mix of amusement and dismay. "Out of the mouths of babes. I'm not lonely, Emma. I have you." Emma's expression turned suddenly serious, her small face carrying a weight of understanding beyond her years. "You smile at me, but your eyes are still sad sometimes. Like when you look at Mommy's pictures. I think maybe you need a grown-up best friend." Jack crossed to her side of the table and knelt, meeting her at eye level. His chest tightened at her perception. "You don't need to worry about me, Emma. That's my job to worry about you." Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. "But I do worry." Her whisper brushed against his ear. "Please, just meet the nice lady for me." Jack closed his eyes briefly, recognizing defeat when it stared at him with Rachel's smile. Fine, one coffee, but no promises beyond that, and you're still staying with Mrs. Reynolds on Saturday. Emma pulled back, beaming victoriously. You won't be sorry, Daddy. Mrs. Reynolds says she's super nice. Her name is Lexi, and she works at a coffee shop. The world of Alexandra Donovan operated at a different altitude, both literally and figuratively. From her corner office on the 59th floor of Atlas Tower, Manhattan, sprawled below like a three-dimensional blueprint of power and ambition. At 33, she had earned her position as CFO of Atlas Industries through a combination of brilliance, tenacity, and the undeniable advantage of being Walter Donovan's daughter. Not that Walter had made it easy. If anything, he'd been harder on Alex than on any other executive, demanding perfection at every turn. Her Wharton MBA and 5 years at Goldman Sachs had been prerequisites, not accomplishments in his eyes. Atlas Industries was Walter's life's work, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate built from scratch by a man who'd once worked on assembly lines to pay his way through night school. Alex scrolled through the quarterly financial reports on her tablet, her brow furrowing at discrepancies that couldn't quite be articulated, but nonetheless nagged at her instincts. Something in the procurement division's expenditures didn't align with their output. The anomalies were subtle, almost invisible, unless you knew exactly what to look for, and Alex did. Numbers had always spoken to her with a clarity that people rarely managed. A sharp knock preceded her father's entrance. Walter Donovan didn't wait for permission to enter any room in the building that bore his name. At 65, he retained the physical presence that had intimidated boardrooms for decades. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed to strip away pretense. Trouble with the Q3 projections. His voice carried the slight roughness of his working-class, Philadelphia origins, an accent he'd never fully shed despite decades in Manhattan's upper echelons. Alex set down her tablet. Not the projections, the actuals from last quarter. Something's off in Carson's division. Walter's expression darkened. He closed the door behind him and lowered his voice. You found something concrete. Not yet, but the pattern's there. Someone's siphoning funds, small amounts from different cost centers spread out enough to stay under the radar. It's sophisticated. Walter crossed to the window, his reflection superimposed over the city skyline. 3 audits in the past year and nothing. Either we're chasing ghosts or someone's feeding information to the auditors before they arrive. Alex joined her father at the window. Carson Walter's jaw tightened. Raymond Carson had been his right hand for 15 years, steering the company through recessions and expansions with unflappable competence. The possibility of his betrayal clearly pained Walter. I need proof before I make accusations. But if it is him, he turned to face his daughter. I've exhausted every official channel. Each time we get close, the trail goes cold. We need someone on the inside who isn't on anyone's radar. Alex felt a chill at the calculation in her father's eyes. What are you suggesting? I need you to go undercover. Walter's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The executive dining room sees more honest conversation than the boardroom ever does. Carson and his team take their coffee breaks at the cafe on 55. I want you there, eyes and ears open. Alex stared at her father in disbelief. You want your CFO, your daughter, to pretend to be a barista? That's your master plan? Walter's expression remained impassive. Carson knows every executive and assistant in this building. He doesn't know the service staff. They're invisible to him, like they are to you. Alex regretted the words instantly, but couldn't take them back. Walter's eyes narrowed. This company employs 8,000 people, Alexandra. If Carson is embezzling, we're not just talking about the bottom line. We're talking about people's livelihoods, their families, their futures. Alex turned back to the window, knowing her father had found her weakness. For all her corporate polish, she had never fully embraced the cutthroat nature of business. The human cost always weighed on her. What makes you think I'd be convincing? As a barista, I've never worked food service in my life. Walter's mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. You spent a semester waiting tables your junior year at Brown, if I recall. Something about finding yourself apart from the Donovan name. Alex flushed. She'd nearly forgotten that brief rebellion. It's a ridiculous plan. Walter moved toward the door, the matter settled in his mind. Take 2 weeks. Use a different name. Change your appearance. Nothing dramatic. You're not as recognizable to the rank and file as you think. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Carson's smart, but he's got a blind spot for people he considers beneath him. Use that. After her father left, Alex sank into her chair, mind racing through the implications. The idea was absurd, yet she couldn't immediately dismiss it. The traditional methods had failed. Perhaps something unorthodox was required. Her gaze fell on a framed photograph on her desk, her mother Caroline, who had died when Alex was 17. Caroline had been Walter's moral compass, the one person who could temper his ruthless pragmatism with compassion. What would she advise now? Alex picked up her phone, hesitated, then dialed Victoria, her father's longtime assistant. Victoria, cancel my appointments for the next 2 weeks. Family emergency. Mrs. Reynolds' apartment smelled of lavender and mothballs exactly as Emma had described. The elderly woman ushered Jack inside with a conspirator's smile that immediately set off warning bells in his head. Jack Sullivan, you're right on time. Such a handsome man, especially when you're not in that uniform. Mrs. Reynolds patted his arm approvingly, eyeing the clean button-down shirt and dark jeans he'd changed into after his morning sleep cycle. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Look, Mrs. Reynolds, I appreciate you setting this up, but I want to be clear, this is just coffee and only because Emma is convinced I need a grown-up best friend. Reynolds' eyes twinkled with mischief. Of course, dear. Just coffee. Her innocent tone didn't match her expression. Lexi is a lovely girl. Works at that fancy coffee shop downtown. Very sweet, very pretty. Jack suppressed a sigh. He'd agreed to this farce to placate Emma, nothing more. 5 years was a long time to be alone, but his life was complicated enough without adding romance to the mix. Mrs. Reynolds glanced at her watch. Now you'd better get going. You don't want to be late. Emma and I will be fine. We're making cookies and watching Singin' in the Rain. Emma's agonized expression behind Mrs. Reynolds' back nearly made Jack laugh. He bent to kiss his daughter's forehead. Be good for Mrs. Reynolds. I won't be long. Emma hugged him tightly. Don't be too quick, Daddy. Give Lexi a chance to see how nice you are. The coffee shop was in Midtown, a small upscale establishment catering to the professional crowd. Jack arrived 10 minutes early, his palms inexplicably damp with nervousness. He hadn't been on a date, if this even qualified as one, since before he'd met Rachel 12 years ago. The rules felt foreign, the expectations unclear. He chose a table near the window, ordered a black coffee, and waited, trying not to check his watch every 30 seconds. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Just as he began to hope for a no-show, the door opened. The woman who entered was not what he'd expected from Mrs. Reynolds' church connection. She was younger than he anticipated, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore minimal makeup, jeans, and a gray sweater that looked casually expensive. Her eyes scanned the room with an intensity that seemed at odds with her otherwise understated appearance. When her gaze landed on him, there was a moment of hesitation, followed by what appeared to be resignation. Jack realized belatedly that Emma's presence had not been part of the arrangement. His pulse quickened with embarrassment as he prepared for the polite excuse and early exit. Instead, the woman walked directly to his table, her movements graceful but cautious. Jack stood awkwardly, extending his hand. Jack Sullivan. You must be Lexi. I'm sorry about the confusion. My sitter had an emergency, so my daughter's with a neighbor. Lexi's handshake was brief but firm. Her smile seemed to struggle between politeness and genuine warmth. It's nice to meet you, Jack. And I don't mind about your daughter. Is she with you? Jack gestured toward Mrs. Reynolds' apartment building across the street. No, she's with my elderly neighbor, the one who set this up, actually. His laugh came out more nervous than he intended. This was her idea, to be honest. She thinks I need a friend. Something in Lexi's expression shifted, a brief flash of what might have been relief. Well, friends are always good to have. She settled into the chair opposite him. Jack studied her, trying to reconcile this polished woman with Mrs. Reynolds' description of a coffee shop worker. There was something guarded about her, a tension in her shoulders, that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable. Before he could say anything else, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced down, expecting it to be Mrs. Reynolds, but instead saw an unfamiliar number. The message consisted of a single line. Check the parking garage security footage from last night. Jack frowned, showing the screen to Lexi. Wrong number, I guess. He set the phone aside. So Mrs. Reynolds said you work at a coffee shop. Lexi nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her untouched water glass. Yes, at the Daily Grind downtown. It's a recent change, actually. I used to work in finance. Jack raised his eyebrows. That's quite a shift. What prompted the change? Lexi's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Burnout mostly. Wanted something simpler for a while. Her gaze shifted to the window. What about you? Mrs. Reynolds mentioned you work nights. Jack nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. Building maintenance at Atlas Tower. I used to be a structural engineer, but after my wife died, I needed more flexible hours for Emma. Lexi's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. I'm sorry about your wife. How long ago? 5 years? Car accident. Jack was surprised at how easily the words came. Usually he avoided the topic entirely. Emma was just 2. That must have been incredibly difficult. Lexi's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. Jack shrugged slightly. You do what you have to do. Emma needed stability, so that became the priority. The night shift isn't glamorous, but it lets me be there when she gets home from school, help with homework, do dinner and bedtime. All the important stuff. Lexi leaned forward slightly. Atlas, Ohio, that's the headquarters for Atlas Industries, isn't it? Do you ever cross paths with the executives there? Jack's brow furrowed at the unexpected question. Not really. They're long gone by the time my shift starts. I see evidence of them, coffee cups, meeting notes left on whiteboards, that sort of thing. The cleaning staff are like ghosts. We move through their world without really being part of it. Lexi nodded thoughtfully. What about Raymond Carson? I've heard he often works late. Jack's pulse quickened slightly. Carson had been on his mind since finding that strange paper fragment. Why the interest in Carson's? Lexi shrugged, her expression carefully casual. Just curious. His name comes up in the business sections a lot. Seems like a powerful figure. He works later than most, yeah. Jack studied her face, wondering about her real interest. Just last night I noticed his office light on at 2 a.m., but he wasn't there. Papers everywhere, half-finished drink on the desk. Not his usual style, he's known for being meticulous. Something flashed in Lexi's eyes, interest perhaps, or confirmation of something she'd suspected. She opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Jack's phone ringing loudly. Emma's school appeared on the caller ID. Jack's stomach dropped as he answered. An apologetic school nurse explained that Emma had fallen during recess and might have sprained her wrist. Nothing serious, but she needed to be picked up. Jack hung up, already rising from his chair. I'm really sorry, but I have to go. Emma had a fall at school. He pulled out his wallet, dropping money for the coffees. Lexi stood as well, genuine concern crossing her features. Is she all right? Probably just a sprain, but I need to get her. Jack hesitated, then added impulsively, This wasn't exactly the coffee date either of us planned, but it was nice meeting you, Lexi. Lexi's smile seemed more authentic now. It was nice meeting you too, Jack. I hope Emma's okay. She hesitated, then added, Maybe we could try again sometime. Without the emergency ending, Jack found himself nodding, surprised at his own response. I'd like that. He scribbled his number on a napkin. In case you want to reach out. As he rushed out the door, Jack didn't notice the calculating look that replaced Lexi's smile, nor the way she carefully tucked his number into her pocket before pulling out a phone much more expensive than a barista's salary would typically afford. Emma's sprained wrist turned out to be more drama than injury. By the time Jack arrived at school, she was happily showing off her ice pack to envious classmates. The nurse confirmed nothing was broken, just a minor twist that would be fine by morning. Jack suspected his daughter might have embellished her distress to escape math class. On the bus ride home, Emma peppered him with questions about the nice lady from the coffee shop. Jack kept his answers vague, unwilling to encourage expectations he wasn't sure would be met. Still, he found his thoughts returning to Lexi throughout the evening. Her intelligent eyes, the way she really seemed to listen when he spoke about Emma, the unexpected warmth beneath her reserved exterior. Later that night, as Jack prepared for his shift at Atlas Tower, he remembered the strange paper fragment from Carson's office. He retrieved it from his jacket pocket, studying the cryptic notation again. Meridian Offshore, Cayman, followed by what looked like a bank routing number. On impulse, he took a photo of it with his phone before carefully returning it to his pocket. The mystery text about security footage nagged at him as well. Wrong number or not, it seemed an odd coincidence, given his discovery in Carson's office. Jack resolved to pay more attention during his rounds tonight. Atlas Tower transformed after business hours. The sleek glass and steel structure that pulsed with corporate energy by day became a cathedral of shadows and silence by night. Jack moved through its spaces with the familiarity of a man who had mapped every corner, every maintenance closet, every emergency exit. This was his domain now, not the executive boardrooms or corner offices, but the skeleton of the building itself, its support systems, and hidden passages. As he pushed his cleaning cart onto the executive floor, Jack noticed Carson's office light was on again. This time, the COO was present, hunched over his computer, face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. Jack kept his head down, intending to pass by without being noticed. "Carson, get in here." The command was sharp, unexpected. Jack stopped, momentarily startled before realizing he had been spotted. He backtracked to the office doorway, careful to maintain the deferential posture expected of maintenance staff. "Something I can help you with, Mr. Carson." Carson barely looked up from his screen, waving impatiently at a coffee stain on the carpet. "Take care of that, would you? Had a small spill earlier?" Jack nodded, retrieving the appropriate cleaner from his cart. As he worked on the stain, he kept his movements slow and methodical, giving himself time to observe. Carson was reviewing what appeared to be financial documents, his expression tense. A half-empty tumbler of amber liquid sat beside the keyboard, a regular fixture Jack had noticed during Carson's late nights. Carson's phone rang, and he answered with a curt greeting. As he listened to the caller, his face hardened. "No, that's not acceptable. The transfer was supposed to be completed yesterday. I don't care about the holiday in the Caymans. Find someone who can process it now." Jack kept his head down, focusing on the carpet stain while his mind raced. Caymans, the same reference from the paper fragment. This couldn't be coincidence. Carson continued, his voice lowering. "Use the Meridian account like we discussed. The board's pushing for another audit, and I need this cleared before they bring in the forensic team." Jack's heart pounded against his ribs, but he maintained his steady cleaning motion. Whatever Carson was involved in, it clearly wasn't above board. The question was, what should Jack do with this information? Carson ended his call abruptly, seeming to suddenly remember Jack's presence. "Are you about finished there?" Jack straightened, keeping his expression neutral. "All done, Mr. Carson. Anything else you need?" Carson's eyes narrowed slightly, as if truly seeing Jack for the first time. "No, that's all." He turned back to his computer, already dismissing the maintenance worker from his consciousness. Jack returned to his cart and continued his rounds, but his mind remained in Carson's office. The reference to Meridian and the Caymans couldn't be ignored, especially coupled with mentions of transfers and audits. It sounded like embezzlement, plain and simple. But proving it and deciding whether to get involved at all was another matter entirely. Later that night during his break, Jack used the computer in the maintenance office to search for information about Meridian Offshore. The results were sparse, a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands with virtually no public information available. One forum post from years ago described it as a ghost entity for moving money where prying eyes can't follow. Jack sat back in his chair, weighing his options. He had a daughter to think about, a stable, if unglamorous job he couldn't afford to lose. Getting involved in corporate espionage and potential financial crimes was the last thing he needed. His thoughts were interrupted by Harold Jenkins, the night security supervisor. At 67, Harold had been with Atlas since the building opened, his weathered face and alert eyes missing nothing that happened after hours. "Working overtime on the computer, Sullivan. Usually you're halfway through your sandwich by now." Harold's tone was casual, but his gaze was shrewd as it flickered to the screen. Jack quickly closed the browser. "Just checking the weather for tomorrow. Emma wants to go to the park." Harold nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. He settled his substantial frame into the chair opposite Jack. "How is that little girl of yours growing too fast?" Jack relaxed slightly, grateful for the change of subject. "She's convinced I need a girlfriend." "Set me up on a coffee date today." Harold chuckled, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. "Smart kid. You've been alone too long, Sullivan." Jack shrugged, unwrapping his sandwich. "It's complicated. Emma comes first, and not many women are looking to take on a package deal with a night shift worker's schedule and a 7-year-old. Harold's expression sobered. "Your wife's been gone 5 years now. She wouldn't want you putting your life on hold forever." Jack picked at the edge of his sandwich, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It was just coffee. Probably nothing will come of it." Harold seemed about to say more, but instead rose with a slight grunt. Well, I'm starting my rounds. By the way, you might want to steer clear of the 58th floor tonight. Carson's got his security lackey Davidson up there, and that guy's always looking for reasons to write up maintenance staff. Jack frowned. Mark Davidson was Carson's head of internal security, a humorless by-the-book type who seemed to view the night maintenance crew with particular suspicion. Thanks for the heads up. Harold lingered in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Word of advice, Sullivan. In this building, it's best to see nothing, hear nothing. The suits up there, they play by different rules. Rules that don't account for guys like us. With that cryptic warning, Harold departed, leaving Jack alone with his half-eaten sandwich in growing unease. The security guard's words felt ominously relevant to what he'd just witnessed in Carson's office. Jack's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but this time he recognized it wasn't a wrong number at all. Meet me at Riverside Park West 83rd entrance. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. Meridian offshore. Jack stared at the message, his appetite gone. Someone knew what he'd found and what he'd heard. The question was, were they an ally or a threat? The next day, Jack found himself approaching the designated park entrance with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He'd arranged for Emma to spend the afternoon with a school friend, telling himself this precaution was probably unnecessary, yet unwilling to take chances where his daughter was concerned. The park was busy with weekend visitors enjoying the mild fall weather. Jack scanned the area, unsure who he was looking for. After several minutes of waiting, he felt a presence beside him. You came, Mom. Lexi's voice was softer than he remembered, tinged with what might have been relief. Jack turned surprise, giving way to confusion. Lexi, you sent those texts. She nodded, gesturing toward a secluded bench away from the main path. Let's sit. This isn't a conversation we should have standing in the open. Jack followed, his mind racing. The coffee shop worker who'd asked about Carson now arranging clandestine meetings about offshore accounts. Nothing about this made sense. Once seated, Lexi's demeanor changed subtly. The somewhat shy barista was replaced by someone more focused, more intense. I need to know exactly what you saw in Carson's office and what you heard. Jack crossed his arms, suddenly wary. How do you know about any of that? Who are you really? Lexi held his gaze steadily. I'm someone who's been tracking Carson's activities for months. The paper fragment you found could be the evidence we need to prove what he's been doing. Jack's eyes narrowed. We who's we and why involve me? Let's just say I represent interests that want to see justice done. Lexi's voice remained calm, but there was an underlying urgency. You're in a unique position, Jack. You have access no one else does. Carson doesn't see you, which means you can see things others can't. Jack leaned back, studying her face. You didn't answer my question. Who are you? Because I'm pretty sure you don't work at the Daily Grind. A flicker of something respect perhaps crossed Lexi's features. You're more observant than I gave you credit for. She sighed, seeming to come to a decision. I work for a private security firm. We've been hired to investigate financial irregularities at Atlas Industries. It was a lie. Jack could sense it immediately, but it contained elements of truth. He decided to play along for now. Why not go to the police or the SEC? Lexi's smile was thin. Without concrete evidence, it's just speculation. Carson's too careful, too connected. We need proof that can't be disputed or covered up. Jack thought of Emma, of the stable life he'd carefully constructed for her after Rachel's death. I'm a maintenance worker with a daughter to support. Getting involved in corporate espionage isn't exactly on my career path. Lexi leaned forward, her eyes intense. What if Carson's activities are putting Atlas Industries at risk? The company employs thousands of people, Jack. If it goes down because of one man's greed, how many families will be affected? Including yours. Jack recognized the manipulation for what it was, but that didn't make the point any less valid. What exactly are you asking me to do? Just keep your eyes and ears open. Document anything suspicious. That paper fragment was a start, but we need more account numbers, meeting dates, names. Jack ran a hand through his hair, weighing his options. Helping could put his job at risk, but ignoring potential criminal activity felt wrong on a fundamental level. His thoughts turned to Emma and what he would want to teach her about doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise right now. He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Lexi rose as well, disappointment evident in her expression. She reached into her pocket and extracted a small business card with only a phone number. If you decide to help or if you find yourself in trouble, call this number. Day or night, Jack took the card noting it bore no name or company logo. Just as he was about to walk away, Lexi added softly, "For what it's worth, I enjoyed our coffee yesterday, even with the abrupt ending. Your daughter is lucky to have a father who puts her first." The sincerity in her voice caught Jack off guard. For a moment, he glimpsed something genuine beneath the professional facade, a flicker of the woman he'd met in the coffee shop. The complexity of her character intrigued him despite his better judgment. Emma's wrist is fine, by the way. Barely a sprain. She's resilient. His response was neutral, but he found himself adding, "Maybe we could have that coffee again sometime, when you're not pretending to be someone you're not." A flash of surprise crossed Lexi's face, followed by what might have been regret. "I'd like that," but the coffee shop wasn't entirely pretense. Jack nodded, not entirely sure he believed her, but willing to leave the door open. "I should get back to Emma. Her friend's mom can only handle so many hours of dinosaur facts and princess stories." As he walked away, Jack felt Lexi's eyes on his back. Whatever game she was playing, he sensed there were layers she hadn't revealed. The question was whether getting closer to her would illuminate those layers or pull him deeper into a situation he might regret. Alexandra Donovan entered her father's penthouse overlooking Central Park, dropping her keys on the marble countertop with more force than necessary. Her Lexi disguise, minimal makeup ponytail, unassuming clothes felt like a costume she couldn't wait to shed. Walter looked up from his desk in the adjoining study, his expression expectant. Well, Alex poured herself a glass of water, buying time. The maintenance worker Sullivan, he's smart, observant. He's noticed Carson's unusual behavior and found a document fragment mentioning Meridian. Walter's eyebrows rose. Interesting. Did you secure his cooperation? Alex took a long sip of water. Not yet. He's cautious, has a young daughter to consider. But I think he'll help. He has a strong sense of right and wrong. Walter's chuckle held little humor. Morality is a luxury, Alexandra. What we need is results. Alex set down her glass, irritation flaring. Dad, I'm lying to an innocent man, manipulating him into risking his job, possibly more. Can we at least acknowledge the ethical implications? Walter closed his laptop with a decisive click. Ethics won't save 8,000 jobs if Carson bleeds this company dry. His voice softened marginally. You said Sullivan has a daughter. Imagine how many other children depend on Atlas Industries for their parents' livelihoods. Alex recognized the tactic her father had always excelled at, reframing moral quandaries into practical imperatives. This doesn't feel right. Few necessary things do. Walter's tone was final, brooking no further argument. Keep meeting with him. Build his trust. Get what we need. Alex turned away, gazing out at the city lights blinking on as dusk descended. The truth was her discomfort stemmed not just from the deception, but from her genuine reaction to Jack Sullivan. There had been something refreshing about him, his unpretentious nature, his obvious devotion to his daughter, the quiet dignity with which he'd spoken of his late wife. In her world of corporate maneuvering and social climbing, such straightforward decency was rare. The fact that she was exploiting it made her stomach turn. Her father's voice interrupted her thoughts. This hesitation isn't like you, Alexandra. Is there something else going on? Alex composed her features before turning back to him. No, nothing else. I'll handle Sullivan. Walter nodded, apparently satisfied. Good, because Carson's getting nervous. The board is pushing for another audit, and he's accelerating his timeline. We need to move quickly. After her father retired to his room, Alex remained in the living room, replaying her interactions with Jack. The maintenance worker clearly suspected she wasn't being entirely truthful, yet he'd still suggested meeting again. Was it merely to gather more information from her? Or was there something genuine in his interest? More troubling was her own reaction. Despite knowing the relationship was built on deception, she found herself looking forward to seeing him again. It had been a long time since she'd connected with someone who saw her as a person rather than a Donovan. Alex pulled out her phone and typed a message to Jack. About that coffee, are you free tomorrow afternoon? The response came faster than she expected. Emma has soccer practice until 4. Coffee after. Alex smiled despite herself. Perfect, same place. Jack's reply was simple. See you there. She set down her phone conflict churning within her. Professional detachment was slipping, and she needed to regain control. Jack Sullivan was a means to an end, nothing more. She couldn't afford to forget that, regardless of how his genuine smile made her feel. The following days established a pattern that felt both strange and increasingly comfortable. Jack and Lexi met for coffee after Emma's activities, or before Jack's shifts. Their conversations gradually shifted from Carson and Atlas Industries to more personal topics. Jack found himself sharing stories about Emma's antics and his adjustment to single parenthood. Lexi spoke vaguely about growing up with a demanding father and the pressure to excel in a world where failure wasn't tolerated. Jack sensed she was carefully editing her life story, but genuine emotion seemed to break through the controlled narrative. Whatever her real identity, her feelings of isolation, and the weight of expectations rang true. He found himself looking forward to their meetings even as he maintained a careful awareness of her ulterior motives. For her part, Alex was experiencing an unfamiliar internal conflict. Each meeting with Jack deepened her guilt about the deception while simultaneously strengthening their connection. When they spoke, she found herself sharing thoughts and feelings she rarely voiced, drawn out by Jack's attentive listening and unpretentious wisdom. Meanwhile, Jack continued his careful observation of Carson's activities at Atlas Tower. The COO's late nights became more frequent, his demeanor increasingly tense. Twice more, Jack overheard phone conversations referencing Meridian and transfers that needed to be completed before the old man brings in another audit team. Harold Jenkins noticed Jack's increased attention to the executive floor. One night as Jack was emptying trash bins in the executive conference room, Harold appeared in the doorway. "You're spending a lot of time up here lately, Sullivan." His tone was conversational, but his eyes were shrewd. Jack shrugged, maintaining his casual demeanor. "Just being thorough. Performance reviews coming up." Harold leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Saw you talking with Mark Davidson earlier." "That's unusual. Security and maintenance don't typically have much to discuss." Jack continued his work, keeping his voice neutral. He wanted to know if I'd seen anyone unusual on the executive floors after hours. Apparently, some files went missing from Carson's office. Harold's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his eyes. "My advice from before still stands. In this building, it's best not to get involved in the affairs of people above your pay grade." His gaze softened slightly. "You've got that little girl to think about." Jack straightened, meeting the older man's eyes. "That's exactly what I'm doing, Harold." Harold studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Just watch your steps, Sullivan. Carson's got a reputation for making problems disappear." He glanced meaningfully at the ceiling cameras. "And remember, in this tower, someone's always watching." The warning stayed with Jack as he completed his shift. Harold clearly suspected something, but whether he was concerned for Jack's welfare or reporting to someone else remained unclear. The next afternoon, Jack met Lexi at their usual coffee shop. Emma's soccer practice had run late, and he'd brought her along, not wanting to cancel. Lexi's face lit up with genuine pleasure at seeing the little girl, who immediately launched into an enthusiastic account of her team's victory. Lexi listened attentively, asking questions that demonstrated real interest rather than polite accommodation. When Emma excused herself to use the restroom, Jack leaned forward, his voice low. "I've been thinking about what you said about Carson putting Atlas at risk. I think you're right. I've overheard more conversations about Meridian and transfers that need to happen before some audit." Lexi's expression sharpened, the professional mask slipping back into place. "Do you have details? Dates, amounts?" Jack glanced toward the restroom door, ensuring Emma was still out of earshot. "Not specifics, but I know he's worried about an upcoming board meeting. He mentioned clearing the accounts before Walter Donovan brings in another forensic team." At the mention of Walter's name, something flickered across Lexi's face, a brief, unguarded reaction that Jack couldn't quite interpret. She composed herself quickly, but not before Jack caught it. "You know him, Walter Donovan?" His question was casual but deliberate. Lexi hesitated, seeming to weigh her response. "By reputation, he's a significant figure in corporate circles." Jack let the half-truth pass, deciding to push in a different direction. "I'm going to help you, but I need to know who you really are. No more private security firm story. If I'm risking my job, maybe more, I deserve the truth." Lexi's gaze dropped to her coffee cup, her fingers tracing its rim. "You're right, you do deserve the truth." Her voice was so quiet he had to lean closer to hear. "But I can't give it to you, not yet. All I can say is that I'm not working against Atlas Industries. The opposite, in fact. Emma's return prevented further discussion, but Jack found himself studying Lexi more carefully. There was genuine conflict in her eyes, suggesting her deception wasn't sitting easily with her. The question was whether that made her more or less trustworthy. As they prepared to leave, Emma tugged on Lexi's sleeve. "Are you coming to my soccer game on Saturday? It's the championship." Lexi looked startled, her eyes meeting Jack's over Emma's head. I'm not sure if your dad won't mind." Emma's confidence was absolute. "Right, Dad. Lexi should come to my game, then maybe we could all go for ice cream after. If I score a goal." Jack found himself nodding, unable to refuse in the face of his daughter's hopeful expression. "If Lexi's free, she's welcome to join us." Lexi's smile was tinged with what might have been regret. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Lexi caught Jack's arm. "About Carson, be careful. He's got security wrapped around his finger, especially Mark Davidson. If they suspect you're watching." Jack covered her hand with his own, noting how she tensed slightly at the contact before relaxing. "I know the risks, but some things are worth standing up for, even when it's hard." Lexi's expression softened, and for a moment the facade seemed to fall away completely. Standing beneath the afternoon sunlight, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "I wish we had met under different circumstances, Jack Sullivan." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away. Her slender figure soon lost in the crowd of commuters. Jack watched her go, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within him. Despite the deception at its foundation, there was something genuine growing between them, a connection that defied the circumstances of their meeting. Emma tugged at his hand, breaking his reverie. "I like her, Daddy. She makes your eyes smile again." Jack squeezed his daughter's hand, touched by her perception. "She does, doesn't she? But Lexi's complicated, sweetheart." Emma's response was simple, delivered with a child's certainty. "All the best people are." Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for Emma's championship soccer game. Jack found himself scanning the sidelines more often than the field, looking for Lexi. Despite his better judgment, he hoped she would come. 20 minutes into the game, as Emma's team was up by 1 goal, he spotted her walking toward the field. She wore jeans and a light sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, rather than in her usual ponytail. She looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen her, almost a different person from the guarded woman he'd met in the coffee shop. Lexi spotted him and waved, making her way through the crowd of parents to stand beside him. "Sorry I'm late. Work emergency." Jack smiled, surprised at how genuinely pleased he was to see her. "You made it. That's what counts. Emma will be thrilled." They stood side by side, watching the game in comfortable silence. When Emma scored a goal late in the second half, Jack let out a whoop of celebration. Without thinking, he wrapped an arm around Lexi's shoulders in an impulsive half-hug. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed against him, her smile wide and unguarded. "Did you see that move?" "She's incredible," Jack nodded, his chest tight with pride. "She gets her athleticism from her mother." Rachel was a college soccer player, All-American her senior year. Lexi's expression softened at the mention of Rachel. "You still miss her very much, don't you?" "Every day." Jack's answer was simple, honest. "But it's different now. Less raw. I can remember the good things without feeling like I'm drowning." Lexi nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding beyond sympathy. "That's what healing looks like, I think. Not forgetting, but being able to carry the memories without being crushed by them." Her insight surprised Jack. Few people in his experience had managed to acknowledge his loss without awkwardness or platitudes. Lexi seemed to genuinely understand the complexity of grief, its evolution, rather than its resolution. After the game, a victory for Emma's team, they celebrated with ice cream as promised. Emma chattered excitedly about the game, her words tumbling over each other in her enthusiasm. Lexi listened attentively, asking questions that demonstrated she'd been paying close attention to the plays. Jack watched them interact, something warm unfurling in his chest at the easy rapport between them. Emma had taken to Lexi with an immediacy that surprised him, given his daughter's usual wariness around new adults. And Lexi treated Emma not as an obligation to be tolerated, but as a person worth knowing, a small human with thoughts and feelings that mattered. As the afternoon stretched into early evening, Jack found himself reluctant for it to end. The day had felt normal, uncomplicated by secrets and corporate intrigue. For a few hours, they had been just a man, a woman, and a child, enjoying a beautiful fall day together. Reality intruded when Lexi's phone rang. She checked the screen, her expression instantly transforming into something more guarded. I need to take this. She stepped away, her voice too low for Jack to hear the conversation. When she returned, the relaxed woman of moments before had been replaced by the more controlled, vigilant person he'd first met. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Work situation. Emma's disappointment was vocal and immediate. But we were going to watch the ducks at the pond. You promised. Lexi knelt to Emma's level, her expression genuinely regretful. I know, and I'm really sorry. Rain check. I promise we'll do it next time. Emma crossed her arms unconvinced. Grown-ups always say next time when they mean never. Lexi's smile was sad but determined. Not me. I keep my promises. Next weekend, ducks and hot chocolate. Deal. Emma studied her face, then nodded solemnly. Deal. But no more work emergencies. Lexi glanced up at Jack, something complicated passing across her features. I'll do my best. As she walked away, Jack felt a growing certainty that whatever Lexi was hiding, it was becoming increasingly difficult for her to maintain. The woman who had played soccer mom for an afternoon seemed more real than the professional operative who had just disappeared into a waiting taxi. That night, as Jack tucked Emma into bed, his daughter fixed him with a serious look. Daddy, I think Lexi likes us. Like really likes us. Jack smoothed her blanket, choosing his words carefully. I think she does too, sweetheart. But her life is complicated. We need to be patient with her. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Reynolds says she's praying for you to find a new wife. She thinks Lexi might be the one God picked. Jack suppressed a smile at his daughter's earnest report. Well, Mrs. Reynolds is very kind to pray for us. But these things take time. Emma's expression turned suddenly vulnerable, her small voice hesitant. Would Mommy be mad if you liked Lexi? Jack's heart constricted at the unexpected question. He sat on the edge of the bed, gathering his thoughts. Mommy loved you more than anything in the world, Emma. And she loved me too. She would want us both to be happy, even though she can't be here with us. Emma considered this, then nodded decisively. Then I think you should marry Lexi. She makes really good duck noises, and she knows all about dinosaurs. Those are important qualities in a stepmom. Jack laughed softly, bending to kiss her forehead. I'll keep that in mind, but for now it's bedtime for soccer champions. Later, as Jack prepared for his shift at Atlas Tower, his thoughts kept returning to the day with Lexi and Emma. Despite the deception at its core, something genuine was developing, a connection he hadn't expected and wasn't sure how to navigate. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, not Lexi's. The message was brief and chilling. Stay away from the 58th floor tonight. Davidson looking for you. Be careful. Jack stared at the screen, a cold weight settling in his stomach. Someone else was watching someone who knew about his interest in Carson's activities. Friend or foe, he couldn't tell. But the warning seemed sincere. As Jack drove to work, the peaceful family day receded, replaced by the grim reality of what he'd become involved in. Whatever was happening at Atlas Industries, powerful people were taking notice of his actions. The stakes were higher than he'd initially realized, and the danger more immediate. For Emma's sake, he needed to be careful. But turning back no longer felt like an option. He'd glimpsed something corrupt at the heart of Atlas, something that threatened not just his job, but potentially thousands of others. And somehow Lexi was connected to it all, her motives still unclear, her real identity, a mystery. Jack parked in the employee lot, his decision made. He would continue gathering information, but with greater caution. And he would keep seeing Lexi, drawn by the genuine connection that seemed to exist beneath the layers of deception. Sooner or later, the truth would emerge about Carson, about Lexi, about the secrets hidden in the upper floors of Atlas Tower. For now, he would watch and wait, navigating the shadows of the corporate world, while holding on to the light of that afternoon with Emma and Lexi, a glimpse of something that felt remarkably like hope. The anonymous warning about the 58th floor proved accurate. Jack entered Atlas Tower to find Mark Davidson waiting in the employee break room, a file folder open before him. The security chief's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a predator assessing potential prey. I've been reviewing security logs, Sullivan. Interesting patterns emerging. Davidson closed the folder with deliberate slowness. You've been spending considerable time on the executive floors lately, going above and beyond your assigned duties. Jack kept his face carefully blank as he stored his lunch in the refrigerator. Mrs. Peterson in accounting requested extra attention to the coffee stains on her carpet. Just doing my job. Davidson's thin smile never reached his eyes. Of course, Atlas Industries values conscientious employees. His gaze lingered on Jack. By the way, how's your daughter, Emma, isn't it? Must be difficult balancing single parenthood with night shifts. The casual mention of Emma sent a chill through Jack's body. The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. I manage. Family comes first after all. Indeed, Davidson rose, straightening his impeccable suit. Mr. Carson appreciates your dedication. He suggests focusing on your assigned floors for now. The executive level has sensitive materials. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings. Jack nodded, the implied warning hanging in the air between them. Davidson's retreating footsteps echoed in the empty break room, leaving Jack with the certainty that his movements were being monitored far more closely than he'd realized. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from Lexi. Need to talk, important. Central Park, Bethesda Fountain, noon tomorrow. Jack hesitated before responding. After Davidson's veiled threat increasing his involvement seemed foolhardy, yet turning back now felt equally impossible. He typed a brief reply, I'll be there. The Bethesda Fountain stood as a centerpiece of Central Park, its neoclassical angel presiding over tourists and locals alike. Jack arrived early, scanning the area for surveillance. The park offered relative anonymity amid the bustle of visitors, but after Davidson's warning caution, seemed prudent. Lexi approached from the east path wearing large sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. The disguise seemed almost theatrical, yet her tension was palpable as she sat beside him on the fountain's edge. Thank you for coming. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes ringed with exhaustion. Carson's accelerating his timeline. There's a major transfer scheduled for tomorrow night, over $20 million moving through Meridian to an account in Singapore. Jack stared at the rippling water of the fountain, processing this information. How do you know this? Lexi hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. I have access to certain communications. That's all I can say right now. Jack turned to face her, fully patience wearing thin. I'm putting my job on the line, maybe more. Davidson made a point of mentioning Emma yesterday. If I'm risking my daughter's safety, I deserve to know who I'm really working with. A flash of genuine alarm crossed Lexi's face. He threatened your daughter. That's crossing a line. Jack noted her reaction, not surprised at Davidson's tactics, but at the target. The pieces still didn't fit. You didn't answer my question. Who are you working for? Lexi's gaze dropped to her hands, now clasped tightly in her lap. What I told you about stopping Carson is true. He's embezzling millions, and if he's not stopped, Atlas Industries could collapse. Thousands of jobs lost. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. I can't tell you everything yet, but I promise when this is over, you'll understand why the secrecy was necessary. Jack absorbed the sincerity in her expression, weighing it against the deliberate omissions. The realization struck him that he wanted to trust her, despite the red flags. This wasn't just about corporate malfeasance anymore. Something about Lexi had gotten under his skin, her complexity, the glimpses of authenticity beneath the performance. I need something concrete, Lexi. Some truth I can hold on to. She seemed to debate internally before responding. My real name is Alex. She offered this small revelation like a peace offering. Not everything has been a lie, Jack, especially not what happened at Emma's soccer game. The admission hung between them, insufficient yet significant. Jack nodded slowly, acknowledging the gesture while recognizing its limitations. I'll continue helping, but my priority is protecting Emma. If that means walking away, I will. Alex reached for his hand, her fingers cool against his palm. I would never let anything happen to either of you. The fierceness in her voice carried absolute conviction. We're close to getting what we need. Carson's planning to clear out the accounts soon. We just need proof connecting him directly to Meridian documentation he can't deny or explain away. Jack thought of the executive floor, the increased security, Davidson's watchful eyes. Getting access would be significantly harder now. I'll try, but they're watching me. Alex squeezed his hand before releasing it. Be careful. This isn't worth your safety. If it gets too dangerous, back off. We'll find another way. As they parted ways, Jack was struck by the contradiction of their relationship, built on deception, yet evolving into something that felt increasingly genuine. Whatever game Alex was playing, her concern for his welfare seemed real. The question remained whether that concern would outweigh her primary mission, whatever it might be. Alexandra entered the penthouse to find Walter pacing the living room, phone pressed to his ear. His tense expression softened marginally at her arrival, though he continued his conversation without pause. The board's getting nervous, James. I need concrete evidence before the quarterly meeting, not speculation and theories. He ended the call with visible frustration, turning to his daughter. While Alex removed her baseball cap, running a hand through her hair. Sullivan's being watched. Davidson mentioned his daughter, a clear intimidation tactic. Walter's expression hardened. Carson's getting nervous. Good, it means we're close. His ruthless pragmatism emerged in full force. Use it. If Sullivan's worried about his child, emphasize the threat Carson poses to her future. Alex stared at her father, momentarily speechless at his callousness. You want me to manipulate a man using his fear for his daughter? That's unconscionable. Walter's laugh held no humor. What's unconscionable that is Carson stealing millions while 8,000 families depend on this company for their livelihoods. His voice softened slightly at Alex's expression. I'm not suggesting putting the child in danger, Alexandra. I'm suggesting you help Sullivan understand the real stakes. Sometimes caring for your family means making difficult choices. Alex turned away, unwilling to acknowledge the grain of truth in her father's argument. I won't use Emma as leverage. That's a line I won't cross. Walter studied his daughter with narrowed eyes. You're developing feelings for this janitor, aren't you? His tone contained equal parts disbelief and disapproval. Alex met her father's gaze steadily. His job title is maintenance engineer, and he's a former structural engineer who gave up his career to care for his daughter after his wife died. She hadn't intended the defensiveness that crept into her voice. And what I feel or don't feel is irrelevant to stopping Carson. Walter's expression shifted to something more calculating. Nothing is irrelevant when it compromises objectivity. Just remember what's at stake here. He left the room without waiting for a response, leaving Alex with the uncomfortable awareness that her feelings for Jack had become obvious enough for her father to notice. She poured herself a glass of water, trying to regain perspective. Walter was right about one thing: Carson's theft threatened thousands of families, including Jack's. But using Emma as emotional leverage felt fundamentally wrong, crossing a boundary between professional necessity and personal exploitation. Alex found herself thinking about the soccer game, about Emma's uninhibited joy and Jack's quiet pride. The genuine connection she'd felt with them had nothing to do with Atlas Industries or Raymond Carson. For a few hours, she'd experienced something authentic in a life long defined by expectations and appearances. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Whatever happened with Carson, her relationship with Jack had evolved beyond its original purpose. The question now was whether anything built on such a foundation could survive once the truth emerged. Jack's next shift at Atlas Tower began with heightened awareness. He moved through his routine with careful efficiency, conscious of the security cameras tracking his movements. Harold Jenkins found him in the maintenance supply room, ostensibly checking inventory, but clearly waiting for Jack to appear. Sullivan, the old security guard's greeting was casual, but his eyes conveyed urgency. Heard you had a chat with Davidson. Nasty piece of work, that one. Keeps his own files on everyone in this building, especially those who catch Carson's attention. Jack continued organizing cleaning supplies, his voice low. I got the message, staying on my assigned floors from now on. Harold moved closer, pretending to examine a shelf of air fresheners. Carson's hosting a late meeting tonight. Conference room on 58. Off the books. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Service corridor behind the east elevators has a maintenance panel that opens into the ceiling space above that conference room. Used for accessing the HVAC system. Might be helpful information for someone with the right motivation. Jack froze momentarily, processing the implications of Harold's words. The older man was offering him a way to gather intelligence on Carson and potentially putting his own job at risk in the process. Why are you helping me? Harold's weathered face creased in a mirthless smile. 30 years watching the comings and goings in this tower. Seen plenty of ambitious executives, good and bad. Carson's something different, cold, calculating. Like a machine designed to accumulate power without conscience. He straightened, moving toward the door. Sometimes the only people who can check the powerful are those they don't see as threats. Just be careful, Sullivan. Men like Carson don't fall easily, and they take others down with them when they do. The maintenance panel Harold described was indeed where he'd indicated, concealed behind a utility access door in a rarely used service corridor. Jack waited until after midnight, when the building had emptied of all but essential personnel, before making his way to the location. The schematics he'd reviewed during his break confirmed the panel would give access to the space above the conference room ceiling, though whether it would offer any useful intelligence remained uncertain. The risk was substantial. If caught, his job would be the least of his concerns. Davidson had made it clear that Carson considered Jack's activities unwelcome, and men with Carson's power rarely issued second warnings. Yet the opportunity to gather concrete evidence was too valuable to ignore. Jack carefully removed the panel, revealing a narrow maintenance crawlspace. The building's skeleton ductwork, electrical conduits, and structural supports created a maze above the finished ceiling. He hoisted himself up, using his flashlight sparingly to navigate toward the conference room's position. The voices became audible as he approached, muffled but distinguishable through the acoustic ceiling tiles. Carson's distinctive tone emerged clearly, addressing what sounded like 3 or 4 others in the room. The Singapore transfer finalizes tomorrow night. After that, we accelerate the timeline. The forensic accountants arrive Monday. By then, we need the Meridian accounts cleared and the documentation sanitized. The board's getting restless, and Donovan's asking questions we can't afford to answer. A second voice responded, too low for Jack to distinguish the words, followed by Carson's sharp reply, "No, Davidson's handling the janitor. He's just a maintenance worker poking where he shouldn't. Focus on scrubbing the Artemis transactions before anyone connects them to Meridian." Jack's pulse quickened. Carson was explicitly discussing the offshore accounts, and apparently considered Jack a minor concern, an assessment that worked in his favor if it meant they underestimated his access and understanding. A new voice entered the conversation, one Jack recognized as Mark Davidson's. "I've been monitoring Sullivan's movements. He's been keeping to his assigned areas since our chat, but I don't trust him. His background check shows he was an engineer before taking the maintenance position. He's smarter than he lets on." Carson's dismissive scoff carried clearly. "He's a night janitor raising a kid on his own. He doesn't have the resources or connections to cause problems. Just keep an eye on him. If he steps out of line again, we'll handle it." The implied threat sent a cold shiver through Jack's body. He continued listening as the meeting progressed, the conversation turning to specific accounts and transfer protocols. The participants referenced documentation that would conclusively link Carson to the embezzlement scheme, but without seeing the materials, Jack couldn't identify their precise nature or location. After nearly an hour, the meeting adjourned. Jack waited until the voices faded before carefully making his way back to the access panel. As he prepared to descend, his phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from Alex. "Where are you? Important update. Call ASAP." Jack replaced the access panel and retreated to a maintenance closet before returning the call. Alex answered immediately, her voice tight with urgency. "Jack, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Carson's ordered a security sweep of all maintenance personnel files. They're looking for vulnerabilities, pressure points." The intensity in her voice conveyed genuine alarm. He knows someone's watching him. Jack leaned against the closed door, adrenaline still coursing through his system. "I just overheard his meeting. They're transferring funds to Singapore tomorrow night, then clearing the Meridian accounts before forensic accountants arrive Monday. Something called Artemis transactions needs to be scrubbed too." A sharp intake of breath came through the line. Artemis was a failed acquisition attempt. From last year, the board rejected it as too risky, but millions were spent on preliminary work. He must have hidden the embezzlement in those expenses. "This is exactly what we need, but..." Her voice faltered. "They mentioned you specifically, by name. Davidson's watching me, but Carson thinks I'm harmless." Jack hesitated, then added, "They're planning something if I step out of line again." "Whatever that means. Jack, this is getting too dangerous. We need to be smart about this." Alex's concerns seemed to transcend professional interest. "What time does your shift end?" 6 a.m. Jack checked his watch, noting it was nearly 2 already. "Meet me at River Park at 7:30. Northeast corner by the chess tables. I'll bring coffee. We need to talk strategy, figure out our next steps." Her voice softened. "And Jack, be careful for the rest of your shift. Stay visible, stick to routine. Give them no reason for suspicion." After disconnecting, Jack completed his remaining duties with deliberate normalcy, even exchanging casual greetings with the night security team during their rounds. Outwardly, he projected the image of an unassuming maintenance worker, while internally his mind raced with what he'd overheard and the implications for tomorrow night's transfer. By shift's end, fatigue dragged at his limbs, but adrenaline kept him alert as he drove to the designated meeting spot. The early morning park was sparsely populated, a few joggers, an elderly man walking a small dog, two retirees already engaged in their daily chess match. Alex sat at an empty table, two coffee cups before her, her expression brightening visibly when she spotted him. "You look exhausted." She pushed one of the cups toward him as he sat down. "The caffeine might help, but you should get some sleep before your next shift." Jack accepted the coffee gratefully, noting her genuine concern. "I'll sleep after I pick Emma up from her friend's house." He took a long sip, organizing his thoughts. "We need to get proof of tomorrow's transfer. Something concrete connecting Carson to Meridian and the Singapore accounts." Alex nodded, her expression thoughtful. "The transfer will happen electronically, but there must be authorization documentation, routing numbers, account information, approval signatures. Carson's too careful to leave digital trails, which means physical documentation. Probably in his office safe." Jack rubbed his eyes, the impossibility of the situation becoming clearer. "How am I supposed to access a safe in Carson's office? That's well beyond maintenance worker privileges." Alex leaned forward, her voice dropping despite the relative privacy of their location. "You don't have to. I can access the executive floor. I just need your help getting timing and location information." Jack studied her face, the pieces still not fitting together. "How exactly can you access the executive floor? And don't tell me it's part of your private security work, because I'm not buying that anymore." A complex series of emotions crossed Alex's features. Calculation, hesitation, and what appeared to be genuine internal conflict. "You're right, I haven't been entirely truthful about who I am or who I work for." She took a deep breath, seeming to reach a decision. "I'm not private security. I work directly for someone with significant interest in Atlas Industries, someone determined to stop Carson before he does irreparable damage to the company." It was still a partial truth at best, but Jack sensed they were moving closer to whatever reality Alex had been concealing. "This mysterious employer, do they have a name?" Alex's gaze dropped to her coffee cup. "I can't tell you that yet, but I promise you'll understand everything soon. The investigation into Carson has been ongoing for months. You're providing the breakthrough we've needed." Jack leaned back, assessing the sincerity in her expression. It wasn't the full disclosure he'd hoped for, but it represented progress. More importantly, it offered a potential path forward that didn't require him to break into Carson's office. "Fine. I'll continue helping, but I want your word that when this is over, I get the whole truth. No more partial revelations or convenient omissions." Alex met his gaze steadily. "You have my word. When Carson is exposed, I'll explain everything." Her eyes softened. What happened at Emma's soccer game and after that wasn't part of any operation. That was real. Jack wanted to believe her, despite the rational voice warning him that someone so comfortable with deception could easily fabricate sincerity. The most troubling realization was how much he wanted her words to be true, how the possibility of a genuine connection with Alex had begun to matter to him in ways that extended far beyond their shared mission. Their planning session continued for another hour, developing a strategy for the next night that would maximize their chances of catching Carson in the act while minimizing risk to Jack's position. As they prepared to leave, Alex hesitated, then reached across the table to take his hand. "Jack, no matter what happens with Carson, I want you to know that meeting you and Emma has been—" She searched for words, an unusual vulnerability in her expression. "It's made me question things about my life I've taken for granted. Made me see possibilities I hadn't considered." The admission carried weight beyond its simple wording. Jack squeezed her hand gently, recognizing the significance of what remained unspoken between them. Sometimes the most important views come from unexpected windows. A maintenance worker sees parts of a building even the architects forget exist. Alex's smile held a mixture of sadness and hope. "Maybe that's why we need people like you to remind the rest of us what we're missing." When Jack finally arrived home, exhaustion crashed over him like a physical wave. He managed a brief phone call to check on Emma before collapsing into bed, his dreams a confused tangle of secret meetings, offshore accounts, and Alex's complex expressions as she struggled between truth and deception. He woke shortly after noon to his phone buzzing insistently. Emma's friend's mother was calling his daughter had spiked a fever and needed to be picked up immediately. Jack dressed hurriedly, pushing aside thoughts of Carson and corporate espionage as he shifted back into father mode. Emma's face was flushed with fever when he arrived, her usual energy subdued as she leaned against him in the car. By the time they reached their apartment, her temperature had climbed to 101 degrees, prompting Jack to call his supervisor to request emergency personal time for his shift that night. The timing couldn't have been worse. Tonight was when Carson planned to execute the Singapore transfer, the opportunity they'd been waiting for to gather conclusive evidence. Yet as he held a cool washcloth to Emma's forehead, Jack knew there was no decision to make. His daughter would always come first, regardless of corporate conspiracies or embezzlement schemes. He texted Alex the situation, apologizing for the last-minute change. Her response came quickly. "Family first, always. Take care of Emma. I'll handle tonight." The message brought both relief and concern. Jack was grateful for her understanding, but worried about what handling tonight might entail. Without his access to the building, what exactly did Alex plan to do? Emma's fever stabilized by early evening, though she remained lethargic, curled against Jack's side as they watched animated movies on the couch. Jack's mind kept returning to Atlas Tower, to Carson's late-night meeting, to the Singapore transfer happening without his surveillance. He checked his phone repeatedly, hoping for updates from Alex, but received nothing after her initial response. As Emma finally drifted to sleep, Jack carried her to bed, tucking the covers around her with practiced gentleness. He brushed damp curls from her forehead, his heart constricting with familiar gratitude for her presence in his life. Whatever risks he'd taken in pursuing Carson's malfeasance, Emma's well-being would always be the non-negotiable center of his decisions. His phone buzzed as he closed Emma's door, a text from an unknown number. "Sullivan, it's Harold. Something's happening on 58. Security sweep in progress. Your friend might be in trouble." Jack froze, staring at the message. Harold could only mean Alex. Had she attempted to access the executive floor alone? If she'd been caught in a security sweep? He dialed Alex's number, his pulse pounding in his ears. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again with identical results. The implications were clear. Either Alex had turned off her phone for operational security, or something had prevented her from answering. Jack paced the small living room, weighing his limited options. Emma was sick and needed him, but Alex might be in genuine danger. The thought of her facing Carson's security alone twisted something deep in his chest, a protective instinct that transcended their complicated beginning. A knock at his door interrupted his deliberation. Jack opened it to find Mrs. Reynolds standing in the hallway, a covered casserole dish in her hands. "Thought you might need some dinner with Emma being sick and all." The elderly woman's eyes were kind behind her glasses. "How is our little patient doing?" Jack accepted the dish gratefully. "Fever's down a bit. She's sleeping now. Thank you for this, Mrs. Reynolds." The older woman waved away his thanks. "That's what neighbors are for, dear." Her astute gaze assessed his tense posture. "You look like you have somewhere important to be." "Emergency at work." Jack hesitated, then made a split-second decision. "Actually, yes. A situation I should really handle in person. But Emma," Mrs. Reynolds was already setting down her purse. "Say no more. I'll stay with Emma while you handle your emergency. She's asleep anyway, and I'll call you immediately if her fever spikes or she needs anything at all." Relief washed through Jack, followed immediately by guilt at leaving his sick daughter. "Are you sure it might be a few hours?" Mrs. Reynolds shooed him toward the bedroom. "Go change out of those sweatpants. I'll be right here with Emma." She winked conspiratorially. "Is this emergency about that nice Lexi girl? Because if so, I heartily approve." Jack didn't correct her assumption, grateful for her help regardless of her misinterpretation. He changed quickly, checking Emma one more time before grabbing his keys and security badge. If Alex was in trouble at Atlas Tower, every minute could matter. The drive to Manhattan seemed interminable, traffic snarling despite the late hour. Jack tried Alex's phone twice more, receiving the same immediate voicemail response. His imagination conjured increasingly alarming scenarios: Alex confronted by security, questioned by Carson, or worse. By the time he pulled into the Atlas Tower employee lot, his rational thought had been largely overtaken by urgent concern. He knew the risks of entering the building during his time off, especially after Davidson's warning, but the possibility of Alex in danger outweighed professional consequences. The night security team recognized him, accepting his explanation about forgetting important medication in his locker without question. The familiarity of the night shift worked in his favor as he made his way to the service elevator's badge, granting him access to areas that would have been restricted during business hours. Jack texted Harold from the elevator, hoping the old security guard might have more specific information about the situation on 58. The response came as the doors opened on the maintenance level. Security sweep over, executive floor clear now, but check the service corridor by east stairwell. Someone was heading there when alarms triggered. The east stairwell service corridor housed electrical panels and maintenance access points, including the panel Jack had used to eavesdrop on Carson's meeting. If Alex had attempted to use the same route, she might have triggered security protocols unfamiliar to her. Jack moved through the deserted building with practiced stealth, avoiding the main corridors where security cameras offered fullest coverage. If Alex had indeed been caught in a security sweep, her presence in the building would have been logged. His priority was finding her without alerting Davidson or Carson to his own unauthorized presence. The service corridor by the east stairwell was dimly lit and silent when Jack arrived. He moved cautiously along its length, checking each maintenance closet and access panel. Near the end of the corridor, he noticed a maintenance panel slightly ajar, the same one he'd used to access the ceiling crawl space. Jack approached carefully, listening for any sound that might indicate Alex's presence. A soft shuffling noise emanated from above the ceiling, followed by what sounded like a suppressed cough. Someone was definitely in the crawl space trying to remain silent. He pulled the panel fully open and whispered upward. "Alex, are you up there?" A tense silence followed, then a familiar voice responded with evident relief. "Jack." "Oh, thank God." Her face appeared at the opening, hair disheveled and a smudge of dust across one cheek. "I triggered some kind of motion sensor. Security was everywhere. I barely made it into the ceiling before they arrived." Jack helped her down from the crawl space, noticing she wore dark clothing suitable for covert operations, a far cry from her casual Lexi persona, or whatever professional attire her mysterious employment normally required. "What happened to family first? You should be with Emma." Despite her words, Alex's expression conveyed clear relief at his presence. Jack brushed dust from her shoulder. "Mrs. Reynolds is with her. Harold texted me that security was sweeping the executive floor." I was worried. His simple explanation contained multitudes' concern that transcended their complicated arrangement, a prioritization that surprised even him. Alex's eyes softened with understanding. "I tried to access Carson's office during the transfer. Security protocols had changed since my last intelligence motion sensors tied directly to the security office." Her frustration was evident. "I was so close. The documentation was right there on his desk, transfer authorizations, account numbers, everything we need." Jack glanced toward the corridor entrance, aware they remained at risk while in the building. "We need to get out of here. Security's finished their sweep, but they'll be on high alert." He guided her toward the service elevator, moving with the confident familiarity of someone navigating their own domain. "We'll use the loading dock exit, no cameras on that route." Alex followed his lead without question, her trust in his knowledge of the building's hidden pathways implicit. As they moved through the service corridors, she explained in hushed tones what she'd observed before being forced to retreat. Carson was executing the transfer personally, $23 million, moving through 3 separate accounts before landing in Singapore. "I saw the routing information, confirmation codes, even his signature on the authorization forms. But without documentation, it's still just my word against his." Jack guided her around a corner, pausing to ensure the path remained clear. "We'll find another way. The transfer history will leave traces, even with their attempts to cover tracks." His reassurance was automatic, born from a growing protectiveness that surprised him in its intensity. They reached the loading dock without incident, slipping out into the warm night air with audible relief. Jack led them to his car, parked in a shadowed corner of the employee lot. Once inside, Alex seemed to deflate slightly, adrenaline giving way to disappointed exhaustion. "I was so close, Jack. All the evidence we need was right there." She leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed momentarily. "I should have been more careful, checked for updated security protocols." Jack started the car, navigating toward the exit. "You couldn't have known, and we're not done yet. Carson still has to cover his tracks before the forensic accountants arrive Monday. That gives us another opportunity." Alex turned toward him, a question in her eyes. "You're still willing to help?" After tonight, Jack met her gaze briefly before returning his attention to the road. "Whatever else is happening between us, and I think we both know it's complicated, stopping Carson is the right thing to do. Emma's future depends on people standing up when they see something wrong, even when it's difficult or dangerous. Alex's hand found his across the center console, her fingers intertwining with his in silent gratitude. Sometimes the most honest connections begin in dishonesty. Her voice carried a wistful quality, acknowledging the paradox of their relationship. I never expected you, Jack Sullivan. Jack squeezed her hand gently, acknowledging all that remained unspoken between them. The most valuable discoveries are rarely the ones we're looking for. His response encompassed far more than their current situation. It acknowledged the unexpected connection that had developed despite the deception at its foundation. As they drove through the night, quiet streets of Manhattan, Jack was acutely aware they were approaching a crossroads, not just in their pursuit of Carson, but in whatever was developing between them. The final confrontation with Carson loomed, and with it, the moment when Alex's true identity and purpose would inevitably be revealed. For now, her hand remained in his, a tangible connection amid the uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and revelations. But tonight, driving through the sleeping city with Alex beside him, Jack allowed himself to hope that whatever emerged from the chaos ahead might be worth the journey that had brought them here. Sunday morning dawned with Emma's fever broken, but Jack's anxiety at full force. The Singapore transfer had occurred, yet they still lacked the documentation needed to prove Carson's involvement. Whatever happened next would have to unfold before Monday morning when the forensic accountants would arrive at Atlas Tower. The window for gathering evidence was closing rapidly. Jack sat at his small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, while Emma watched cartoons in the living room. Her recovery allowed him to focus on the Carson situation, though guilt still nagged at him for having left her with Mrs. Reynolds the previous night. His phone vibrated with an incoming text from Alex. Need to talk. Safe location. Can you meet at Brooklyn Botanic Garden at 10? Bring Emma if needed. I know she comes first. Jack studied the message, noting the consideration for his parental responsibilities. It represented a shift in their relationship, Alex's acknowledgement that his daughter wasn't merely a complication, but the central priority around which all plans must revolve. He texted back, Emma's better. Mrs. Reynolds offered to take her to Sunday school. We'll meet you there. The Brooklyn Botanic Garden offered both beauty and security open spaces that prevented eavesdropping, with enough visitors to provide anonymity without crowding. Jack found Alex near the Japanese Hill and Pond Garden, sitting on a bench overlooking the koi pond. She appeared different today. Her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her casual clothes replaced by a well-tailored blazer and slacks that spoke of professional authority. I've been thinking all night about our options. Alex shifted to make room beside her, her expression reflecting hours of strategic calculation. Without the transfer documentation, we need another approach. Carson's preparing to cover his tracks before tomorrow's audit, which means he'll be in his office today. Jack absorbed this information, the implications clear. You're suggesting we try again today? After last night's security alert, Alex nodded, her determination evident. Sunday security is minimal. Most executives don't work weekends, so there's a skeleton crew at most. Carson won't expect another attempt so soon after last night's failure. Jack watched the koi fish circling beneath the wooden bridge, their movements creating rippling patterns across the water's surface. Like the fish he and Alex were navigating, currents largely beyond their control, responding to forces set in motion by others. Even if we get into his office, what exactly are we looking for? The transfer documentation may be gone already. Alex leaned forward, voice lowered though no one was within earshot. Before I had to retreat last night, I saw Carson preparing an encrypted flash drive backing up details of all the Meridian transactions before wiping the originals. He'll keep that drive close. It's his insurance policy if things go wrong. Jack considered the plan's implications, weighing the professional and personal risks against the necessity of stopping Carson's scheme. The question hanging unasked between them was why this mattered so much to Alex, why she was willing to risk her own safety for what appeared to be corporate whistleblowing. Before I commit to anything else, I need to know who you really are, Alex. He turned to face her fully. No more partial truths or convenient omissions. If we're going back into that building together, I deserve to know exactly who I'm working with. Alex held his gaze, the internal conflict visible in her eyes before resolution settled across her features. She reached into her blazer pocket and withdrew a business card, handing it to him without a word. Jack looked down at the embossed card, the Atlas Industries logo prominently displayed in the corner. The name beneath hit him like a physical blow. Alexandra Donovan, Chief Financial Officer. His mind raced, reconstructing their entire relationship through this new lens. Not just an employee of Atlas Industries, but Walter Donovan's daughter, one of the highest-ranking executives in the very company where Jack worked night shifts. The pieces finally clicked into place: her knowledge of Carson's activities, her access to secure areas, her reluctance to reveal her true identity. "You're Walter Donovan's daughter." The realization emerged as a statement rather than a question. "You've been investigating Carson on your father's behalf." Alex nodded, watching his expression carefully. "My father suspected embezzlement months ago. 3 audits found nothing which suggested someone was tipping Carson off. We needed someone inside who wasn't on anyone's radar, someone with access after hours when Carson thought no one was watching." Jack struggled to reconcile the Alex before him with the Lexi he'd thought he was getting to know. "She's been playing me from the beginning." The thought carried a bitter edge that surprised him with its intensity. Alex reached for his hand, but Jack pulled away, not ready for the contact. "When we met at the coffee shop that was planned, Mrs. Reynolds setting us up, it wasn't coincidence." Alex admitted, regret evident in her voice. "But we didn't manipulate your neighbor. My father had identified you as someone with access to the executive floors. We approached Mrs. Reynolds, explained we were investigating potential wrongdoing that threatened Atlas employees, and asked if she would facilitate an introduction." Jack absorbed this, recognizing the careful orchestration behind what he'd believed was a simple blind date. He stood needing physical distance to process the revelation. The betrayal stung more deeply than he would have anticipated, suggesting his feelings for Alex had progressed further than he'd acknowledged even to himself. "Everything between us, it was all just part of your operation." His voice remained steady despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. "Emma's soccer game, the park, the moments that felt real." Alex rose quickly, urgency in her movement. "No, the mission was real. Carson is stealing millions, threatening thousands of woes. But what happened between us, with you and Emma?" Her voice faltered briefly. "That wasn't planned. It wasn't part of any strategy." She took a step closer. "I didn't expect you, Jack Sullivan. I didn't expect to feel what I feel when I'm with you and Emma." Jack searched her face for deception, for the calculated performance he now recognized she was capable of. Instead, he found what appeared to be genuine distress, the conflict of someone whose professional and personal worlds had collided unexpectedly. Before he could respond, his phone rang, Mrs. Reynolds' name flashing on the screen. He answered, listening intently to the elderly woman's apologetic explanation that Sunday school had been canceled due to a water leak and she'd taken Emma back to their apartment building. "I need to get back to Emma." Jack ended the call, returning his attention to Alex. Her revelations had changed everything, yet the fundamental problem remained. Carson's embezzlement scheme threatened the company, including Jack's own employment security. Alex nodded, understanding immediately. "Emma comes first, always." The certainty in her voice carried the weight of principle rather than strategic calculation. "But Jack, regardless of how we started, what's happening with Carson is real. He'll destroy Atlas Industries if he isn't stopped. 8,000 jobs, including yours." The appeal was effective precisely because it aligned with Jack's own concerns. Whatever his feelings about Alex's deception, the threat Carson posed remained legitimate. His daughter's future security was tied to his continued employment at Atlas, a connection that transcended his personal sense of betrayal. "I need time to think." He stepped back, creating physical distance that mirrored his emotional withdrawal. "I'll text you later." Jack drove home in a state of numb processing, the revelation of Alex's true identity, forcing him to reevaluate every interaction they'd shared. The genuine moments, her connection with Emma, the quiet conversations that had felt increasingly authentic, now existed in a context of deliberate deception that he struggled to reconcile. Emma greeted him with enthusiastic energy, her fever completely gone as she launched into an explanation of the crafts Mrs. Reynolds had helped her make instead of attending Sunday school. Jack focused on his daughter's happiness, pushing aside the complications of Alex's revelation to be the attentive father Emma deserved. As the day progressed, however, his thoughts kept returning to the fundamental problem: Carson's embezzlement and the rapidly closing window to gather evidence before Monday's audit. Whatever Alex's deception, the threat to Atlas Industries remained real. 8,000 jobs hung in the balance, including his own. Emma's stability depended on his continued employment. By evening, after Emma was settled in bed, Jack reached his decision. He texted Alex, "I'll help stop Carson. Not for you, but because it's the right thing to do. What's the plan?" Her response came almost immediately, "Thank you. Carson will be working late tonight, final preparations before tomorrow's audit. Meet at South Entrance Parking Garage, 11 p.m. Jack arranged for Mrs. Reynolds to stay with the sleeping Emma, explaining it was a work emergency. The elderly woman's knowing smile suggested she believed this emergency involved Lexi, but Jack didn't correct her assumption. Some truths were too complicated to explain. The Atlas Tower parking garage was nearly empty when Jack arrived, most spaces vacant on a Sunday night. Alex's car, a discreet black sedan, rather than the flashy luxury vehicle he might have expected from an executive, was parked in a shadowed corner near the service entrance. She emerged as he approached, dressed in dark clothing similar to the previous night. "Thank you for coming," despite the professional context vulnerability showed in her expression. "I know this isn't easy after what I revealed." Jack maintained emotional distance, focusing on the operational aspects of their mission. "What's the plan?" "My badge won't access Carson's office, even with maintenance override." Alex held up a small electronic device. "Security key duplicator. It will get us to the executive floor. From there, we use your knowledge of the service areas to approach Carson's office through the maintenance quarters. We need that flash drive. It contains all the transaction records he's about to erase." Jack's eyebrows rose at the sophisticated equipment. Being the boss's daughter comes with interesting resources. Alex flinched slightly at the edge in his tone, but didn't deny the accusation. They entered the building through the service entrance, Jack's maintenance badge granting initial access without triggering alerts. The Sunday night security team consisted of a single guard monitoring cameras from the lobby desk, a minimalist weekend presence that improved their chances of moving through the building undetected. They reached the executive elevator bank without incident, Alex's device overriding the security protocols that would normally have prevented access without proper clearance. As the elevator ascended toward the executive floor, the tension between them thickened, professional necessity, forcing cooperation despite the personal breach of trust that remained unaddressed. The elevator doors opened to reveal a darkened executive floor, emergency lights casting long shadows across the expensive carpeting. Jack led them toward the service corridor that would provide access to the ceiling crawlspace above Carson's office, moving with the practiced quiet of someone accustomed to navigating spaces meant to remain unnoticed. Alex followed close behind her movements, betraying professional training beyond what a typical CFO would possess. Jack filed this observation away, another piece of the complex puzzle that was Alexandra Donovan. They reached the maintenance panel without incident, Jack opening it with practiced efficiency. "You should stay here. I'll check the office first. Confirm Carson's location before we proceed." Alex shook her head firmly. "We do this together." Her voice allowed no argument. "I won't let you take risks alone, not after everything that's happened." The unexpected protectiveness caught Jack off guard. Despite his lingering anger at her deception, something in her determination to share the danger rather than delegate it struck him as genuinely principled. They navigated the ceiling crawlspace together, moving carefully to avoid creating noise that might alert anyone below. Light filtered through the ventilation grates, guiding them toward Carson's corner office. As they approached, voices became audible. Carson engaged in heated conversation with another man. Jack positioned himself carefully above the ventilation grate, Alex beside him, as they observed the scene below. Carson stood behind his desk, face flushed with anger, while Mark Davidson paced the office floor. "The board meeting's at 8 tomorrow. The forensic team arrives at 9. We need to complete the file purge tonight." Carson's voice carried the strained control of someone under immense pressure. The servers in Singapore confirmed a receipt of the final transfer. 23 million safely beyond reach. Now we just need to eliminate the paper trail. Davidson stopped pacing, his expression troubled. "What about Sullivan?" "The night guard reports he entered the building last night during his time off shortly after our security alert. He's becoming a liability." Jack felt Alex tense beside him at the mention of his name. Carson's response was dismissive, though his tone carried a harder edge than before. "Sullivan's just a maintenance worker. Once we're clear of this audit, I'll have HR terminate him for some minor infraction." He waved a hand impatiently. "The immediate priority is sanitizing these files." He held up a small black flash drive. "Every transaction, every account. Once the originals are purged, this becomes our only record in our insurance policy if Walter gets too close." The confirmation of their target, the flash drive containing all evidence of Carson's embezzlement, sent a surge of adrenaline through Jack's system. The drive represented both danger and opportunity proof of Carson's crimes, but also confirmation of Jack's involvement in the investigation. Jack shifted position for a better view, his weight causing a slight creak in the ceiling structure. Below, Carson paused mid-sentence, looking upward with sudden alertness. "Did you hear that?" Carson's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Check the corridor. Now." Davidson drew his weapon, a development Jack hadn't anticipated, and moved toward the office door. The situation had escalated beyond corporate espionage into potential armed confrontation, raising the stakes dramatically. Jack met Alex's eyes in the dim light, urgency in his expression. They needed to retreat immediately. She nodded in silent understanding, beginning to move backward toward their entry point. The ceiling creaked again, despite their caution, louder this time. "Someone's up there!" Carson's shout propelled them into faster motion, abandoning stealth for speed as they crawled toward the maintenance panel. They reached the access point just as alarms began blaring throughout the floor. Carson had triggered the security system. Jack dropped down first, turning to help Alex descend from the ceiling space. They could hear footsteps approaching rapidly from the main corridor. "This way." Jack grabbed Alex's hand, pulling her toward a service stairwell known only to maintenance staff and security. It bypassed the main security checkpoints designed for emergency evacuations rather than regular access. They descended several floors at a rapid pace, the alarm continuing to echo throughout the building. Jack's mind raced, calculating their options for exiting without being captured by security. The loading dock offered their best chance, minimal camera coverage and multiple exit points to the street. As they reached the 20th floor, the service door above them burst open, Davidson's voice calling for them to stop. The security chief's footsteps pounded down the stairs behind them, gaining ground with each flight. Jack pushed through a maintenance door on the 15th floor, pulling Alex into a narrow utility corridor lined with electrical panels. "We can't outrun him on the stairs. This leads to the express elevator shaft maintenance access for emergency repairs." Alex followed without question, trusting his knowledge of the building's hidden infrastructure. The utility corridor ended at a heavy metal door, secured with a mechanical lock rather than electronic security. Jack's keys granted access to a narrow platform overlooking the express elevator shaft, a dizzying vertical tunnel running the height of the building. The maintenance ladder runs all the way to the basement. Jack pointed to metal rungs embedded in the concrete wall of the shaft. "It's our only option. Davidson will have alerted security to cover all standard exits." Alex didn't hesitate, stepping onto the ladder and beginning the descent. Jack followed, pulling the access door closed behind them. The shaft amplified every sound, their breathing and movement creating echoes that seemed dangerously loud in the confined space. They descended steadily, the physical exertion demanding full concentration. 20 floors of vertical climbing taxed muscles unaccustomed to such specific strain, but fear of capture provided powerful motivation to continue despite burning arms and cramping fingers. When they finally reached the basement level, Jack guided them through a maze of maintenance tunnels that connected various parts of the building's foundation. The security alarms continued above them, but the basement remained relatively quiet and an underground domain rarely visited by anyone except maintenance staff. "We need to get out of the building before they lock it down completely." Jack led them toward a maintenance tunnel that connected to an adjacent parking structure. This tunnel was designed for utility access between buildings, not for regular personnel movement, making it unlikely to be monitored during a security alert focused on the main tower. They emerged into the neighboring parking garage without incident, the cool night air washing over them as they exited the underground tunnel. Alex leaned against a concrete pillar, the adrenaline crash leaving her visibly shaken. "They know it was us." Her voice carried the weight of consequence. "They'll review the security footage, identify us both." Jack nodded grimly, the implications settling like lead in his stomach. "I'll be fired immediately. But that's the least of our concerns if Davidson decides to press charges for corporate espionage or breaking and entering. We need to go directly to my father." Alex straightened, decision crystallizing in her expression. "Without the flash drive, our only option is to present what we know before Carson can cover his tracks completely. The Singapore transfer alone is enough to trigger a full investigation if we can get Walter to act immediately." The mention of Walter Donovan reminded Jack forcefully of Alex's true identity, the reality he'd temporarily set aside during their escape. CFO Alexandra Donovan could walk into the chairman's office tomorrow morning and receive immediate attention. Jack Sullivan would be lucky to get past security without being arrested. Your father has no reason to believe a maintenance worker over his trusted COO. Jack's tone carried resigned pragmatism. Without proof, it's just an accusation. Alex met his gaze steadily. He'll believe me, and I'll make sure he understands your role in uncovering this, that you risked everything to protect Atlas Industries. Her determination seemed genuine, though Jack remained skeptical of her ability to shield him from the consequences of their failed operation. They separated in the parking garage, agreeing to communicate only by phone until they could meet with Walter the following morning. As Jack drove home, exhaustion competed with anxiety about the future. His job was almost certainly lost. The question remaining was whether criminal charges would follow and what that would mean for Emma. Mrs. Reynolds was dozing on his couch when he arrived home, awakening with a start as he entered. Her curious expression suggested she expected details about his emergency, but Jack provided only vague reassurances and genuine thanks for her help with Emma. After the elderly woman departed, Jack checked on his sleeping daughter, her peaceful expression, a stark contrast to the chaos he'd just escaped. Everything he'd done, the risks taken, the rules broken, had been fundamentally about securing her future. Now that future seemed more uncertain than ever. His phone vibrated with a text from Alex. Meeting with Walter arranged for 7 a.m. Before Carson arrives. We'll pick you up at 6. Everything will work out, I promise. Jack wanted to believe her, but experience had taught him promises were easily made and frequently broken. He replied with simple acknowledgement, then tried to get what rest he could before morning brought the reckoning they now faced. Sleep proved elusive, his mind replaying the events at Atlas Tower, the discovery of Carson's flash drive, their near capture, the desperate escape down the elevator shaft. By dawn, Jack had abandoned any pretense of rest, instead preparing mentally for the meeting with Walter Donovan. He wrote out detailed notes of everything he'd observed regarding Carson's activities, determined to present his case as thoroughly and credibly as possible. Emma remained blissfully unaware of her father's turmoil, chattering happily about school as Jack prepared her breakfast. He arranged for Mrs. Reynolds to take her to school, explaining he had an early meeting, a partial truth that spared his daughter unnecessary worry. Alex arrived precisely at 6, her executive persona fully in place, tailored suit, professional demeanor, the casual Lexi nowhere in evidence. Only the shadows beneath her eyes suggested the previous night's adventure had affected her at all. The drive to Atlas Tower occurred in tense silence, both processing the magnitude of what awaited them. Jack studied the Manhattan skyline as they approached the building's imposing silhouette, now representing something entirely different than when he'd first joined the maintenance staff 5 years earlier. Alex used her executive access to bring them directly to the private elevator serving the chairman's office on the 60th floor. As the elevator ascended, she finally broke the silence. My father can be intimidating, but he values honesty and directness. Just tell him exactly what you observed without embellishment. Her advice seemed meant to reassure, though it did little to ease the knot of tension in Jack's stomach. How Walter Donovan responded to their accusations would determine the course of his professional future, possibly his legal status as well. The elevator doors opened directly into an executive reception area more luxurious than any space Jack had encountered in his after-hours work. Victoria, Walter's assistant, looked up in surprise at Jack's presence alongside Alexandra, her professional mask slipping momentarily before she recovered. Your father's expecting you, Alexandra. Her gaze flickered to Jack with undisguised suspicion. I wasn't informed about a guest. Alex moved past the assistant with practiced authority. He's with me, Victoria. Her tone allowed no argument as she guided Jack toward the impressive double doors of Walter's office. Walter Donovan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. He turned as they entered, his penetrating gaze assessing Jack with immediate intensity. So you're Sullivan, the maintenance worker who's been helping my daughter investigate Carson. Walter's voice carried neither approval nor condemnation, merely analytical interest. His resemblance to Alex was evident in the sharp intelligence of his eyes and the determined set of his jaw. Alex closed the office door, ensuring privacy for their discussion. Jack uncovered concrete evidence of Carson's embezzlement scheme, Dad. Singapore accounts systematic theft disguised through the Artemis acquisition, exactly as we suspected. We attempted to secure physical documentation last night, but were discovered. Walter's expression remained impassive as Alex outlined their findings in the previous night's events. He listened without interruption, his attention eventually shifting fully to Jack. Why risk your position, Mr. Sullivan? Most employees in your situation would look the other way, particularly given the delicate circumstances of raising a child alone. Walter's question seemed genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Jack met the older man's gaze directly. When you're responsible for someone else's future, you see things differently. Atlas employs 8,000 people, 8,000 families, depending on this company's stability. If Carson's embezzlement threatened that stability, looking away wasn't an option. His response was simple, but carried the weight of personal principle. Something shifted in Walter's expression, a subtle acknowledgement that suggested Jack had passed some unspoken test. The older man moved to his desk, pressing the intercom button. Victoria, contact security. I want Raymond Carson detained upon arrival. Then call the board members' emergency session at 8:30. Walter's decisive action demonstrated confidence in their account without additional evidence, a trust Jack hadn't expected. Alex exhaled audibly, relief evident in her posture. You believe us. Without the flash drive, Walter's expression hardened. I've suspected Carson for months. Your reports confirm my suspicions, and Mr. Sullivan's first-hand observations provide the corroboration I needed to act. His gaze returned to Jack. The Singapore transfer created electronic records our forensic team can trace even without Carson's flash drive. Your contribution has been invaluable, Mr. Sullivan. The validation from the chairman himself should have provided satisfaction, yet Jack remained acutely aware that his own position remained precarious. He'd still violated numerous company policies, accessed restricted areas without authorization, and participated in what could be construed as corporate espionage. As if reading his thoughts, Walter addressed the unspoken concern. I understand security protocols were breached during your investigation. Rest assured, no disciplinary action will be taken against you. In fact, I believe your initiative and integrity deserve recognition rather than punishment. The relief of avoiding termination, possibly prosecution, washed over Jack with unexpected intensity. He hadn't realized how completely the weight of potential consequences had been pressing upon him until it was lifted. The remainder of the meeting focused on operational details. Jack providing specific information about what he'd observed in Carson's office. Alex contributing financial analysis that connected the embezzled funds to specific projects within Atlas Industries. Walter absorbed it all with strategic calculation, planning the confrontation with Carson and subsequent damage control. As their meeting concluded, Walter's assistant announced that security was in position to intercept Carson upon his arrival. Walter nodded approval, then turned to Jack with unexpected directness. Mr. Sullivan, I understand you were an engineer before joining our maintenance staff. Walter's statement caught Jack off guard. He hadn't expected the chairman to know details of his professional background. My daughter speaks highly of your integrity and intelligence. Atlas Industries values both qualities. I believe your talents are being underutilized in your current position. Jack glanced at Alex, whose expression revealed nothing about this apparent job discussion. Walter continued without waiting for response. Our facilities management division needs someone with practical knowledge of building systems combined with engineering expertise. The position offers regular daytime hours and significantly increased compensation. He held Jack's gaze steadily. Consider it recognition for exceptional service to this company. The offer blindsided Jack completely, a professional lifeline he hadn't dared hope for. Regular hours would allow him to be present for Emma in the evenings to attend school functions and help with homework. The increased salary would provide security he hadn't experienced since Rachel's death. I appreciate the opportunity, sir. I'd like to accept. Jack's response was immediate, the decision requiring no deliberation. Walter nodded with satisfaction. Victoria will handle the paperwork. You'll start next week reporting directly to the Director of Facilities. He extended his hand, the gesture symbolizing Jack's transition from night maintenance worker to professional staff. As they exited Walter's office, Alex's professional demeanor softened slightly, genuine pleasure evident in her expression. You deserve that promotion. She maintained a careful professional distance in her father's domain, but her eyes conveyed deeper meaning. I meant what I said yesterday, Jack. What happened between us, it became real for me regardless of how it started. Jack acknowledged her words with a slight nod, emotions still too complex for simple resolution. The events of the past weeks had transformed his life in ways he was still processing, from routine night shifts to corporate intrigue, from isolated widower to someone cautiously open to new connection. They parted in the executive lobby, the demands of the impending board meeting requiring Alex's full attention, while Jack needed to process all that had occurred. Their farewell remained professionally appropriate, yet undercurrents of unresolved potential flowed beneath the surface interaction. Jack walked through the morning-busy atrium of Atlas Tower, experiencing the building from an entirely new perspective. No longer invisible night staff, but someone with recognized value, someone whose actions had directly impacted the company's future. The sensation was unfamiliar, but not unwelcome, a reclamation of professional identity he'd set aside after Rachel's death. Outside Manhattan bustled with Monday morning energy pedestrians, hurrying toward offices and appointments with typical New York determination. Jack moved against the flow of inbound workers heading home to share his news with Emma. Her response to his daytime schedule would be jubilant. No more missing evening activities, no more babysitters during homework time. His phone vibrated with a text from Alex. Carson taken into custody. Board meeting beginning now. Can we talk later? There's more to say than what professional settings allow. Jack stared at the message, weighing the complexity of his feelings toward Alexandra Donovan. The deception that had initiated their relationship couldn't simply be erased, yet neither could the genuine connection that had developed despite that beginning. The question remained whether anything authentic could be built upon such a foundation. After careful consideration, he texted back, "Emma has a science project presentation at school this afternoon. She'd like you to be there if you can make it." 3. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but an open door, an opportunity to determine whether what existed between them had value beyond the now concluded Carson investigation. Alex's response came quickly. "I'll be there. Thank you, Jack." As he drove home, Jack reflected on the extraordinary series of events set in motion by a single torn paper fragment in Raymond Carson's trash. What had begun as a simple maintenance job had evolved into something vastly more complex, bringing professional opportunity, potential, relationship, and renewed purpose. The future remained uncertain in many respects, but for the first time in 5 years, that uncertainty carried positive potential rather than merely survival concerns. Whatever developed between himself and Alex would require time, honesty, and careful navigation of their different worlds. The promotion offered financial security for Emma, but also new professional challenges. Jack Sullivan, night maintenance worker, widower, single father, had temporarily inhabited a world of corporate intrigue and high-stakes investigation. Now he would return to his central identity as Emma's father, but with expanded possibilities and resources to build their future together. As Manhattan's skyline receded in his rearview mirror, Jack found himself looking forward, rather than back, to Emma's science presentation, to Alex's potential place in their lives, to daytime work that utilized his long-dormant skills. The journey ahead would undoubtedly contain complications, but for the first time in years, those complications seemed worth navigating rather than avoiding. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important discoveries happen while looking for something else entirely. The torn fragment that had revealed Carson's embezzlement had ultimately uncovered something far more valuable: the possibility of rebuilding what grief had dismantled, of professional renewal, of connection beyond loss. That unexpected discovery might prove the most significant of all.